Welcome to Porch Play Chats, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA USA. IPA USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association. And as part of our efforts to advocate for play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats, which are conversations with people who are just as passionate about play as we are. You can find all these Porch Play Chats, and there will be about 150 of them after the end of March 2023. You can find these Porch Play Chats on the IPAUSA.org website. Go to that top right-hand corner, subscribe to our Facebook channel, be a friend on our Facebook page, follow us on Instagram, and magically, every Monday, a new Porch Play Chat will appear in your feed. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm the president of IPA USA. And joining me on the porch today is Sally Haughey. How are you?
Yes. Hey, how are you? So excited to be here.
Good to see you again. Sally is the CEO and founder of Fairy Dust Teaching. Fairy Dust Teaching is built on the passion for the wonder and magic of early childhood. They believe young children have the right to play, to be collaborators in learning, and to dream. After 20 years of successfully teaching in various school settings, she has committed herself to what she loves most, empowering and inspiring educators. Her focus is to provide a deeper level of service and training that help educators own their true teaching self. And Sally has worked with way over 100,000 educators in her online e-courses and workshops. And Sally today is going to talk to us about process art.
Yes.
I'm so
yes.
happy.
Oh my goodness. You know, process art is really important to me because my whole life was given, like, I wouldn't be here. I'm going to cry. You just started me off crying.
Okay.
I wouldn't be here if it weren't for art. I have auditory dyslexia. It was undiagnosed. I didn't do well in school. So like if you do one of those biology tests where you pick which one and they all look the same and they're trying to, like, one's almost the answer, but not quite the answer. Like that kind of thing for me with my dyslexia was absolutely crushing. You asked me to write an essay, I can, knock it out of the park. You asked me to pick, and I'm like, ah. So the first educator that ever saw me was in the 6th grade, and it was my art teacher. And she was a process art teacher at the level of middle school.
That
gave us
crazy.
technique. And yes.
That's wonderful.
So my stand is, so I was a practicing artist when I kind of got sidetracked into education through my son's difficulties. So, lately I've been looking at the landscape of early childhood and seeing there are delays in emotional regulation and children's ability to regulate themselves. We're seeing delays from the pandemic. We're seeing delays in fine motor. We're seeing delays in social connection, like everything's just we're seeing delays in potty training and the ability to control oneself and regulate one's own, using the restroom. So, what's the answer? Well, one of them is process art.
Yes. And so talk about why that's the answer, because I feel like I preach all the time. Process art, process art, process art. So why is the answer process art?
Well, one, we know. I mean, it just doesn't take much time other than picking up some paint or a marker or a pencil yourself, and to allow yourself the freedom to just create, even make nothing. The practice of just doodling, the practice of just how calming it is to the spirit, how, there's emotional regulation in the act of doing art. What's so incredible about process art and I call it the action formula,
Mhm.
is that process art takes a tool that does an action with a material, because process art's not just paint, it can be clay, it can be wire, it can be a bunch of different things, and a surface that all of that takes place on. Because there's more than construction paper, there's cardboard, there's newsprint, there's, packaging, there's old things, recycled things. So, all of those things can vary, but where the healing, where the attending to the child in today's classroom lives is in the action.
Mhm.
So if we look at Bev Boz is like is the giant I'm walking behind, or I'm standing on her shoulders right now. So I want to be really clear about that. Like, she never took part in a workshop. I did meet her. I did have that,
Wonderful experience.
yes, I have a picture inside her store, like going, "You saved my life," because she was the very first early childhood icon that I ever read their work and really followed what they were saying in 1996,
Mhm.
right back in the day. And
Mhm.
so her book, the one on process art, the muffin tins, I forget the
Oh
whole
yeah.
title.
Yeah, I got that on my bookshelf. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I highly recommend. If you can get a copy, nab it immediately. But with let's say you take a potato smasher, right? And you're pressing it into paint and then pressing it onto paper. There's this huge pressing of the body. So we can look at how like for some children, that's really satisfying. If children that I've had, like when I had Head Start classes and or I worked in West Tulsa, I would do plungers, like plunging down into the paint, like something that takes the action itself is
It's a release.
driving and a release.
And it's a
Yes,
release. Yes. Those kids who pound the Play-Doh or the clay on the table, I'm like, that's what they need. It's this release. It's a amazing sensory experience that provides so much release and emotion, feeling of joy to be able to create something or make something or just have the experience of doing it
exactly.
without a teacher saying, "Here's what we're going to make today. And
Oh
here's
my
where you
God.
put the sticker."
Oh,
No, the eyes don't go there.
it's when you get, like, I had in one class, I had a runner, and I mean, like, worst case scenario, like running into the parking lot, just like running with 3-year-old, and really scary, like
Yeah.
horrifyingly scary. And one of the things that I found would self-soothe his nervous system was process art. So I always had some process. And I think for many teachers, they have no clue. How do I set this up? How do I make it so it's not such a mess and that I don't have to be standing there? And I'll tell you, every class I've had, and I taught 3-year-olds, I teach to be self-sufficient, and they actually love it. One of the very first ones that I did is directly from Bev Boz, where I took an old cabinet door that was about like this big, and I glued down different sizes tiles. And then the kids would paint those tiles, press the paper on it, and then pull it off. And it's called mono printing. That's the key to process art. You get a tray and you have them do the technique into the tray, press the paper on it, pull it off. And, it's not so messy. It's all contained.
Right.
And they love self-serve. So this little guy, this runner, would come in and I'd have like 3 different processes set up for him. And he would just start into it. And he loved the big motion,
Oh,
just loved it. And, occasionally it got a little messy on the fact that it would splatter, but that beat running after him in the parking lot, any
All the
day,
time.
all the
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
all the time. And it was that was helping him get out that energy, right? That he needed to get out. I remember Bev Boss saying when she had a child that was having some self-regulation issues in the classroom, she said, "Come with me." And she took him outside and she said, "Run." And he just ran and ran and ran on the playground. And that's what he needed. So sometimes I think we see those behaviors as challenges instead of communication. That I need something big body.
That's it.
I need something that uses my big muscles. I need something with pressure, right? That I can push on. Oh my goodness. Yes, absolutely.
And then the competency, I think children really want to experience independence and self-choice,
Mhm.
freedom. I think inherently we crave that. I mean, at every stage of life, we're building agency to have freedom. Like I have my own business because it gives me freedom. I'm not locked into an institution. I get to serve people on the level I know they get to be served. Young children on their level. Like I watched one little guy have been in like 10 foster homes, 3-year-old, and loved going to the trays and doing some process. And then at this particular location, they had the only thing I had for them was one of those this dates me back in the 90s, the hanging string.
Oh
So it was
yeah.
like you clip the art hanging down.
Yes.
There
Right.
wasn't we weren't quite
We
that
don't have the
evolved yet.
trays anymore. Yeah, we didn't have those trays yet.
And so those little 3-year-olds love taking the clothespin and clipping their art. Sometimes their art would then smash together because of how they put it up. They didn't care. I didn't care. They love their ability to choose when they're done, where to hang it, and to do it themselves. Sometimes I have one little guy, I know it was all about clipping the art to the string, not about the process. So I think when we allow children to have multiple opportunities to express themselves in different forms, like in paint, in clay, the little runner, the other thing that he loved that is really interesting, never had this happen before. I had a big stump in the classroom and I put it on the table looking at it like, what can we do with it? And he took clumps of clay and pressed it into it.
Oh.
And he just so we ended up having, I even have it on the blog, like these collection of stumps and him pressing the clay into it. That's all he did.
That's all he did.
Like, why not?
Why not? Yeah. Why not? And again, I think it goes back to our image of what it should be versus the child's image of what it should be. And so we need to refocus on forget what you want it to look like. That's not process art. Provide the materials and the opportunity and the choice to participate or not participate. And then when they're there, to participate in the way that they are driven internally to participate, right? They're going to do it in what their body is telling us they're ready to do, not what we think they should be doing. The kids who ruin the markers because they're,
yeah.
So what's that telling you? Not you can't use markers anymore. It's telling you they need to pound something. So let's give them something to pound, and clay is the perfect thing to do.
Exactly. And I love process art because it attends to each child's development. It's children's self-direct. So you know exactly what they need are being addressed in that. The problem with product art is that it's actually shaming. And
Yes.
it's actually shaming at any level. So if you and I went to a workshop together as adults, and I always like to think about if I were standing in the child's place as a human being, like to look at children as they are human beings. And how am I going to bring honor and respect to this individual? And they may not be getting it at home. So I might be the only adult who actually relates to them on the level of respect. And I'm standing there with, looking at, in my own situation, if I had someone telling me, this is what you're going to make exactly, and actually might come and put their hand on top of my hand to make
Yes.
sure. Do you know how I would feel? I'd probably break down crying as an adult woman, in her 60s, who's lived a long life. Start crying, going, I haven't spent 60 years to come to the point of you telling me where to put the googly eye for,
Right.
like I want to put a scatological word out in there right now. It's like, that's what I would be, very scatological. Why do we expect children to tolerate that?
Because we're the adult, I think is why we think, and we want it to be pretty so the parents will like it.
But they're
And
usually not even pretty. They're stupid.
they're
They're
right.
still just like, I am so over paper plates
Oh
turning
my
into
God,
things. Like,
please.
stop it. Stop
Yes.
the paper plate crap,
Please.
because it's just like, no.
No. Well, it's really interesting.
I love your face. No.
No, right. In the process versus product session that I do with my students, I have pictures of product and process. And then, Pinterest has some wonderful things and some awful things. And so I just put that right out front. But I think what we have to do is we have to help students see the difference between the process art and the respect and the child's interest and motivation versus the product art, which is your motivation, right? And so I think showing them those, the contrasting images of what process art is and what product art is. I had a group of infant and toddler students who were in the infant and toddler class, and they were like, oh, Dr. Lawrence, this process stuff, really, we need to be, we need to be helping them with their fine motor skills and pressing this. And I said, no, but we're going to play. So I brought out all the process art stuff I have, the salad spinners and the melting, warming tray that they could do stuff with, and shaving cream and sand and paint. And I had Play-Doh, not clay. I really would love clay. All that stuff, I just throw it down on the table when they came back into class the next time. And I said, see what you can discover. And they went, oh my God, they were joyous. Oh, I want to try that again. Oh, maybe I could do it this way this time. Maybe, oh, look what you're doing. Oh, can I try that? Can I? And because I had all sorts of different painting instruments, including plungers and potato mashers. And they were having a ball. And so I sat them back down and said, process art. And they went, okay, we get it. We got it. We got it. And their favorite one was, the stockings, the old hosiery that you would fill with sand or something and let them flop it from a high. That was like the most favorite of, because it was heavy and they could let it go and it made a noise and they loved it. And so sometimes I think we just have to give it to them so that they can see the value of it instead of just even showing them pictures of process versus product. I just don't.
No, because I also think that really to transform our industry out of the practices we know are not serving children, like for people to really understand why play serves the developmental needs of children, we're not saying play because we want a bunch of freedom writers, well, I do, but
Yeah.
but if I can put my desire for a bunch of freedom writers beside myself and still stand in, this is what's going to build children's best capacity for academic learning. Like
Yeah.
we know the brain science. So when you know that, and when you go and you view through brain science, process art, all of the executive functioning skills required and that are built in that are astonishing. And when you make visible to children that anything can become a tool inside of process art,
Mhm.
you unleash their creativity, their
Oh my
problem
God.
solve, their flexible thinking. Like the list goes on and on and on and on.
Taking it, and once they've had that experience and that opportunity to see beyond the paintbrush, you take them out for a walk, or you take them into the forest and they say, can we paint? Well, of course you can paint with that. Can we, all of those things are so important as part of their development, and to open up their minds to what creativity is. They are creative. We're the ones that suppress it because of the product art that we're trying to get them to do.
Well, and the other thing I think is really important, and I am going to give you a link to a free download I have that is a guide to process art. One of the things that I really stood with in parents and families and administrators, and I think this is really important, is that for reading, and I really got into this for my own son who was in kindergarten, not developing at the level the educator wanted him to, wanted him to be retained, etc. So I started getting interested in what is it that children need for reading and writing, because my son was brilliant. And I knew this was a fact, not a mommy fact, but a real fact. It really
Right.
did.
Yeah.
I was like, and I researched it, and, and he graduated #2 in his high school, even though he, didn't read till 3rd grade, really read on any, big level. And what I discovered was that for reading and writing, one of the first things, it's actually a physicality that has to develop before the cognitive can come in. So there's this whole physical development that happens in play in early childhood that's working with 7 muscles in the eyes. And those muscles are necessary and are developing for tracking, teaming, all these different functions required for reading and writing. They're not developed with much finesse when we're doing, I'm holding your hand and showing you where to put the googly eyes. And you can see the fallout of children using electronics in the pandemic and the impact of their ability. Because here's what's even more, like, this is what gives me goosebumps. Like, there's even more research saying like that development of the eyes and their ability to use their hands is also related to the developing cognitive. So like there's all of these amazing books written about how our hands are a function of our cognitive development.
And I think we get back to what we know about child development. It's interrelated and
Bingo.
it's interdependent. And so if we can just get people to recognize it's not just teaching children sight words, it's not just drilling and killing the alphabet, that all of these things are interrelated and interdependent, and they have a continuum. And so if we restrict their fine motor and physical development because maybe we don't like risky play, or we feel like we have to manage the product art, then we're impacting the cognitive development, and we're impacting the social and emotional development, and we're impacting the fine motor and the large motor development, and we're impacting the language development. I mean, it's just, it if you're grounded in child development, you get that. And I think teachers understand that development is interrelated and interdependent, but I think practicing that is more difficult. I think they get it, but applying it makes those things get in our way, right? Our own experiences influence us and get in our way.
And what I would say to those educators, what I beg them to hear, is that we want the gold standard for young children. They deserve that. And now we're seeing all of these delays. You know, and I am hearing the stories I'm hearing. Like I talked to a colleague this weekend who I actually taught with, and she's saying in her 4-year-old classroom, universal pre-K classroom, changing a child's clothing for a bathroom accident is a daily activity.
Oh.
In my 20 years of teaching 3-year-olds through, first grade, I literally have had a handful, all in the 3-year-old classroom, right? Like it just didn't happen. So we know that sitting in front of a device or a TV has had an impact on development. And what I find so interesting is when children are young, this is the classic example. We're not, doing the crawling movements for them. We're not going up, we do play with them and delight in that unfolding, sequence of reflexes that lead to upright, right? But we don't go, no, here's where you put your knee. That's not where you put your knee when you crawl. You crawl like this, we don't get all uptight and, make standards around crawling. Yet we do that. All of a sudden they become verbal and we abandon all common sense and practicality and get nutso, this is where you put the Google eyes and all the that's not what a turkey looks like. I had a teacher
Please
tell
don't
my
do the
daughter,
hand with me with turkeys. Oh my God.
I cannot take it.
Oh.
Yeah, I think we just, and parents, when you tell them what's happening inside of process art and they see the budding development of thinking, of problem solving, of self-soothing. Art is self-soothing.
Yes.
It's so, it's just like it's like a vitamin, like process art is one of the most powerful things to bring to your classroom. And I remember Bev Boz, one of the things too, is I love gluing, and we call it collage, but now finally people are talking about gluing tables. I always had a gluing tray, because it's a deeply satisfying thing to squeeze those, like 3-year-olds could squeeze glue bottles. I would buy gallons of cheap glue that doesn't work just so they could squeeze it,
Yeah.
And then
Think
having
of the muscles they're developing when they're squeezing it.
And then all like those trays full of things. And I remember she had like old film and, like all sorts of things of reuse, what we now call loose parts for the children to glue. And it's, again, I was so fortunate that I had that impact on my thinking out of the gate as an educator. That was my first year of teaching that I dove into Bev Boz, and thank the Lord I had that. I can't imagine not understanding,
Exactly how that art and that open-ended art and multiple arts a day, not just the one you want for the unit.
Exactly.
Are
And
so
no units, please. No
please.
units.
Oh my God. And the other thing I want us to just think about, and I really want you to send me that link so I can stick it in the show notes for the YouTube. One of the things I want us to think about is, if we're talking about hand coordination, we're talking about all the muscles that we need to have refined in order for us to be able to learn to read with our eyes. One of the things, is, the easel should be out every day.
Amen.
It should have, I don't care what you put on it. And if children ask for something else, you should give it to them. But at least paint or crayons that are attached to it or something, because this and this and this and this and this is really important
Yes.
to those eye
That.
muscles.
That.
And so, oh, the easels are so messy. Let's figure it out. How can it be less messy? What can we put a
Do you know
shower
what I
underneath?
know? You know what I did? One year I had a tosser. He was a Jackson Pollock reincarnated.
Oh my God.
I'm sure it was Jackson Pollock in a new life, because he was throwing paint at the easel all the time. So I brought in a refrigerator box and put the easel in the refrigerator box. So,
Oh my God.
because I wasn't going to spend every day cleaning up after him, but I
No.
didn't want to constrain Jackson Pollock.
Oh my God, that is amazing. And again, what a simple solution to do that, or take the easels outside, right? Take them out. Let's do
Well,
it.
and the other thing I find really interesting about the eyes. So I only taught 1 year of first grade. It was my last year of teaching. And it was a struggle, I'll tell you. It was like being a first year teacher again. I cried a lot. But the thing that I found is I had one little boy who he knew it, like he would know all of his sight words, be rocking along, and then it'd be gone the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started really investigating what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
What I figured out through testing is that he had no peripheral vision. And so that peripheral vision, that tracking, like when we read, we're reading what's come before and what's come after and what we're reading, right? So we're processing a ton of data all at once,
Mm-hmm.
very complex. But
Mm-hmm.
without that peripheral, he didn't have a long-term memory, which isn't that, like, to me, that's like, right, peripheral vision as an impact on retention of knowledge. And so what builds that?
Yeah.
What builds that? Play.
Play. Play.
So
where you are in space, looking at the world around you.
I did do some targeted, eye training with him because, I'm a scientist and I love, doing the extra to ensure a child's development. If it's off kilter, delayed, we want to give that support. But the best thing he could do would be building, would be playing. The kind of things that as a first grader he wanted to do were ideal.
Yes, exactly. It was intuitive. It was coming from within. This is what I need to do in order to develop. It's not like it's a conscious thing. It's an internal thing.
It's the evolution of being human. And I think what's so interesting is we know from the research that the normal window of learning to read is from age 3 to age 10. And anything in that window is normal. Like a child, if they're not ready in kindergarten, first grade for reading, we pull them out into special classes, which is actually shaming.
Yeah, shaming, damaging, takes them out of their community, keeps them. That's the ability group. We have to talk about ability grouping one time. That's the danger of ability groups, because I can't use Vygotsky's theory and learn how one of my friends who's a better reader than I am is decoding. Maybe I could try that. And so when we put them in the red birds and the blue birds or the green birds or whatever we're calling the reading groups, we're robbing children of the opportunity to learn from their peers. And we also have to recognize that when you take them out, they're missing the community that they should be in all the time. So, where do these archaic, and I mean, they've been happening for way too long, but how do we keep making the same mistakes? And I think that needs to be another porch play chat. because
Well,
it's just like we're on this hamster wheel, and it hasn't
well,
worked for decades. Yeah,
yeah, the factory model is not attending to the individuality of the child. It's dealing with the collective hitting benchmarks simultaneously. And the thing for people listening going, oh my gosh, what about the poor child who needs support? I'm not talking about no support. I'm talking about when that child's in my class, as a first grader, kindergartner, pre-K, that I'm actually documenting and analyzing their specific learning modalities, their processing systems, and supporting them individually in the growth that they need to be successful. So it's not an abandonment. It's just not grouping, instead of this little guy who had no peripheral vision, instead of sending him off to a reading group of children who, and he knows the minute he walks out that classroom that he's in the ones that can't do what everyone else can do. Instead, I'm sitting with him, giving him targeted, on point, what he needs to develop that peripheral vision, versus going to a group that's not going to be there. They don't even know he has no peripheral vision.
Exactly. And so I think we need to expand on this in another chat if you're willing, but I will. Sally's going to send me that link to that resource. And I think that is a perfect way for us to start closing out this one. But any final thoughts on why? I mean, I think we've covered an entire course of why process art is so important.
Yes.
Do you have any final thoughts that you want to connect before we end our chat today?
Well, for anyone who's experiencing behavioral challenges, anyone who's experiencing, transitional issues, emotional regulation, I beg you, pull out the process art. You're going to find, and again, by trays, it's going to be a lifesaver. I can't imagine teaching without it. Just can't imagine it.
And are you talking about they're like square or rectangular and they're white and they have a lip on them?
What I buy is I go on Amazon, and I'll include a link for you guys.
Oh, good.
Is I buy cookie sheets on Amazon, but commercial sized.
Yeah, the big ones.
The big one. And what happens is there's room enough, and I put the paint in common, like ketchup containers and things like that, so they can squeeze it out. And you can buy really small 2-ounce ones. So if you have a class that, they're going to squeeze all of it out, you can put it in the small one and let them, limit it. But that way they can manipulate the paint, the sensory part of it, and then get the paper for the print. And then they can use lots of different tools. It just contains it. Then you're just throwing that into the sink to clean.
Right. Oh, those are wonderful tools. I used, I just put paper, butcher paper, whatever it was, on the big rolls newsprint that we got from the newspaper people. Their leftover rolls that they would just load into my car.
I got those too. I love
those. Those were wonderful.
Must have.
Oh my goodness. And so if it was going to be, stamping or doing any of those big things, they didn't have to have their own piece. It was just the process that we were working on. And that's what I would use. But if I use trays at all, they weren't as big as those. So I'm excited to give people that resource and those tools, because, we're talking about the importance of it. Giving you the tools to find them is also important. So Sally, hang in there while I close this out and don't go anywhere. So to learn more about Porch Play Chats, please visit our website at ipausa.org. And until next time, keep on playing.